Hey, Darius, I am so grateful that you decided to be in this conversation with me. I should turn on transcription though. Let's see where that is, live transcript. All right. So I'm grateful that you decided to be in this conversation with me. You popped to mind when I was crafting the idea, and it was just like one of those would like to have conversations because I didn't believe you'd say yes. So I'm wondering why you said yes.
Why did I say yes? Well, one, thank you for having me here. And thank you for including me in the conversation. Um, I think I said yes because the core question you posed was one that felt very foreign to me. It was one that
Wow.
I was like, I don't think I ever really think about it that way. Maybe it's a language I use that's different. It's like
Mhm.
I approach it through different language or paradigm, but it just something activated in me that was like, there's probably some interesting things for me to think about here, and you know, unknown areas that might help my own personal development.
So what question, because I was going to say, oh, this is the, by the way, everyone, this is a conversation we're having, but now I'm curious, what question did you hear?
It was around like how do you approach decolonization in your work?
Hmm,
And I was like, I never think about that ever.
cool.
And I feel like that might be surprising to you because I felt like you thought maybe I do, and I'm like, I never think about that. Um, and so yeah, so that was really exciting and scary for me.
It's a beautiful place to play around the exciting and scary. And I think, just for the context of this conversation, this is part of the series Decolonizing Work. And I tend to just ask people, what does that mean to them? And I like this thing that you've begun to raise. We're often talking about the same thing using multiple labels. And so I'm curious about, I don't care which labels you use, it's more about the process. I am absolutely certain that you've thought about aspects of this without it being called decolonizing. And I think too, just for me, since I grew up on an established colony, Jamaica, we
Hmm.
used colonization as a phrase to talk about a bunch of things. Whereas when I migrated to the US, it wasn't a word that was used at all. And then
Yeah.
in recent times, there's been a lot of conversations around returning both land and power and financial well-being, and now people are using it. So we've all, I think, interacted with the word in different ways. So now,
Hmm.
just given the little bit that we've said and what you've thought about between when I invited you and now, what do you think decolonizing work means to you?
I think there there's two questions there. I'm going to answer your question because I'm tempted to answer my version of the question, which is what language do I use? Because I do that work, but it's just different. So your question is decolonizing work. I think there are prejudices and systemic limitations and biases that are in play in society everywhere. And decolonization is like the colonizers' prejudices that exists in places that continue a disadvantaged amount or continue advantages for one group and disadvantage other groups. And these are often subtle or hidden or sometimes just blatant and accepted. And addressing them, becoming aware of them, um, can help create a more equitable and just work environment.
That's cool. So then I'm now really curious about your question that you were playing around with. What's the language that you've used, or maybe just the ways you've thought about some of these ideas?
So here's an interesting
I'm
thing I
sorry, so
discovered.
Darius, also, I mean, people listening in will have your information in show notes and stuff, but can you also
Sure.
just ground this in your work and
Sure,
life
sure. Yeah, I think
practices?
that's
Yeah.
important. Yeah. So I am a portrait photographer. I created a signature photography experience called HEARTshots, not headshots, but HEARTshots. And I almost exclusively work with like mission driven, heart centered thought leaders. So speakers, authors, coaches, healers, creatives in that space. And it's a very unique process because it's a 5 hour experience and we only take photos for like an hour and a half at the end. And so it involves like deep connection, both from a place of like intelligence and intimacy and play and like seeing people, but also helping people see myself. And so that for me, it's like I have to let go of everything. It's not just decolonizing, it's like all beliefs I
Right.
have to let go of and just see the person,
Mm-hmm.
So there's an element of that. The other thing I was going to say that I recently discovered that was really eye-opening was I have a lot of Indian friends,
Mm-hmm.
and they're a form of brown skin. I'm a form of brown skin. I'm from, my ancestry, my family's from Iran,
Mm-hmm.
and so sometimes we look similar-ish,
Mm-hmm.
but I sat down with one of my Indian friends and we had a really fruitful conversation around like our histories are quite different
Right.
because the people from my country never experienced colonization.
Right.
So when we see white people dawning and taking in our culture, we like enjoy it. So it took me and my family a long time to like understand like um the concepts of cultural appropriation
Right.
because we don't have that history. It's
Right.
different. And so that was a really interesting conversation to have and just like see the similarities and the differences between us. And so, yeah, so like, we talked about this before. Like, I am definitely not an expert in this topic at all, but I'm very open and curious to learn more because I know it matters and I know it makes an impact on people's lives and on our society.
Mm-hmm.
And, my general approach, I think maybe why you were interested in speaking with me is because it like really is an individualized approach.
Right.
Like I want to know the person and I want to step outside the normative understanding of what is beauty, what is wisdom, and so that requires dismantling a lot of structures and systems and getting to the core of each individual.
I love this word dismantling because there's a way that, sometimes when we're in these conversations, people say, I don't see X, whether it's I don't see color or I don't see whatever it is. And it's different from saying I'm dismantling the ways I see X so that I can see a person, for whatever they're bringing to the table. And so I'm curious about what you've needed to dismantle, just given you and your
Yeah,
history.
a lot. A lot. Um, for me, this is a very spiritual topic, and it's my core belief is that all beliefs are BS.
Okay,
All
say
beliefs are
more.
made up. E-
Uh-huh.
Every single belief is made up.
Mm-hmm.
There is no such thing as Canada. There's no such thing as 12:23 p.m. We made that up. There's no such thing as a Darius. We made that up.
Okay.
You know? these are all made up things, and many of them are helpful, because if you didn't know if it was 12:23 p.m., how would we meet together? We
Right.
needed to make that thing up so we could communicate better. And how would you know what my
Synchronize.
name is?
Yeah.
We needed it, right? We needed these things. They were helpful, but at some point we forgot that we made them up, and they just became like capital T truth.
Right.
And so I literally dismantled everything, all my beliefs, and continue to do so, just to question them. And then my approach isn't that like you shouldn't believe in anything. It's just that you should pick your beliefs, and you should remember that you are choosing your beliefs, and everyone else is going to choose their own beliefs, and they're right and you're right. And if you want to coexist, you have to find a way to be inclusive and
Navigate
allow
that.
these
Yeah.
different beliefs to, exist. And so, yeah, like beliefs around gender and race, and even just like, is this a simulation?
Mm-hmm.
Is money, what is my belief around money? What is my belief around sexuality? What, all of it, like, what is my belief? Am I a photographer? Do I want to continue being a photographer? Like, everything is fair game. I question all of it, but have got better and better at doing it from a place of inclusiveness and creation and building, as opposed to destruction and like just destroying and moving back. But sometimes you got to go dig in, before you can build up strong, solid creations.
So as an artist, because I'm imagining that I have two young artists at home, and I'm imagining that in this space of creativity and construction of beauty in whatever form, it's kind of informed by some of the stuff that you have dismantled or are dismantling. How would you guide another artist listening to our conversation into this process that feels, as I listen to you, it seems pretty comfortable. Like you're kind of like, yeah, this is my process. I dismantle, I'm constantly dismantling, and I interrogate. And then yes, I'm imagining my son, who is just trying to figure out who he is, and is at this point still, a lot of stuff still is invisible. How would you guide, or what would you suggest as a process for this process of for this way of dismantling and seeing?
I would offer up to your son and anyone else listening a different way of approaching it.
Hmm.
I am 39 years old. I've been doing creation and art for many years in many different forms, and I don't know who I am. And I'm never going to know who I am. I'm
Hmm.
constantly changing and evolving and growing. So it's like if you hold on to the structure too much,
Right.
then you can't move. So it's like, your son isn't sure who he is.
Hmm.
Awesome.
That's
That's the
great.
path.
Yeah.
Constantly just growing and exploring and trying, and no, that didn't feel right, and oh, that feels really great. And there, it is helpful to have values, that can stay with you, but those can still also evolve. It's helpful to have goals and move towards them, but sometimes you don't make that goal and you grow because of it, and sometimes you get to that goal and realize that wasn't it. So like the whole thing is just this spiritual journey of self-discovery and exploration, so that's my personal, completely made up belief of why we are here.
Right. That's cool. And I think within the artist creative framework, there are a lot of these definitions of what beauty is, and what needs to be seen. I remember the first time I saw my profile. It's such a stark memory. I don't know how, I must have been in my teens, or maybe at 12. And I looked at my profile and I saw the shape of my nose to the side, and I was horrified. And I was like, all along, it looked like that. People are seeing me look like that. And I felt so, it felt ugly. And at that
Mm-hmm.
point, I just, at 12 or 13, I didn't do much more thinking except let's not look at yourself in the mirror sideways. Just make sure no pictures are taken like that. So I wonder how you, I guess, not combat, but like, how do you interact with some of the centered ways that we see ourselves as you are standing behind the camera eventually? So you are seeing a person and seeing them fully, and then there's how the person sees himself. And so there are these two things that are interacting, that both of which have biases and stuff like that. How do you navigate that and help the people you work with navigate that so that we see broader, maybe?
Mm-hmm. Good question. My entire process is an answer to that question.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
It's a process that has us talking for several hours before about exactly that. That 95% of people who come to me are convinced they're not photogenic, and they're convinced they're the only ones, and they're not on the call or the Zoom with me where every day hearing it. Like, the most healing thing in the world to me was watching people come in that look completely different every day. And you're like, okay, you look like you should be a model. You're traditionally like stunning. You're gonna sit in this couch and you're gonna have no insecurities. You have just as many insecurities as the person before you and after you and the person in front of you. How is it possible? Like, you cannot have, like, you're scientifically perfect. And every day, no matter what, anything, every day. And then I realized it's a program. It's a program that runs differently for different categories of people, for sure. Like, for example, women and women identifying people have it much stronger. The program is much, much stronger. But it's a program we all have. And so when people look at their photos, easily 98% of the time, the first photo they see, they hate. They just hate it. And I warn them of that. I'm like, if you're a 98%er, just like me, you're gonna hate it. If you're a 2%er, a unicorn, you maybe you're gonna have a different experience. But my approach to them is a lot of like consent, a lot of chatting, a lot of being radically honest, not like sugarcoating stuff, but also being really gentle and kind at the same time, and telling them about the emotional experience of what they might experience, not necessarily have to experience. And it's just based off of doing 600,000 photos of people. Like, you see trends, obviously, right? And this little exercise I do that helps a lot is the first photo, I'd get them to just pause for 10 seconds because they're holding the camera and there's a desire to just go to the next photo. And I'm like, my suggestion is just take a breath, take 3 breaths, stay with the photo and just listen. Don't say anything yet. Listen to whichever voice inside of you has the most energy. There's all these different versions of you, and there's a mic, and whichever voice has the most energy is going to grab that mic and start saying things to you inside your head. Just listen. 10 seconds. I'm not trying to torture them, but what I've discovered is if you just hold space, a little bit of space for whichever part of them has the most energy, which 98% of the time has very, very, very critical things to say.
Right.
And you create this beautiful, safe space for them to feel they can actually voice it. Then you hear everything. And I've heard everything. What do you feel? I hate this photo. Okay, what else? What is that voice saying? Look at my eyes, look at my nose, look at my wrinkles, look at my teeth, look at my ears, look at my hair, I've literally heard everything.
Yeah.
And I know they're not lying.
Right.
And I know most of the times I can't see that. Like, you mentioned your nose. I'm a professional at looking at people's faces. I didn't even see. I'm like, you have a beautiful nose. You did, but you see it different. Just the way I see my nose different, that's broken, and I see my tooth that's crooked. We see ourselves differently than the rest of the world.
Right.
And so by holding that space for just that 10 seconds, it's like a younger child version of them
Mm-hmm.
is getting to be heard and seen. And then it's like any energy that's been pent up, once it's able to be like, there's a moment where it goes,
Mm-hmm.
finally, somebody listened to me.
Already heard, yeah.
Somebody's witnessed me. Does
Yep.
that voice go away? No. It's still there, but it's not like monopolizing the conversation. It's been heard, it's been integrated into the experience. It's now a part of this photo shoot instead of being like, I want to go, I hate this. And then this incredible thing happens like 80% of the time. So when we do that process, they will accidentally get to the final photo. Like they circle back to that same photo that 5 minutes ago they absolutely hated. And then they end up starring it and saying, oh, I love this photo. And then I'll look at them and I say, just so you know, that was the photo you hated 5 minutes ago. No, 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 no,
That was
Darius.
not,
That
that's
one,
not
my
it.
nose was different. My
Yeah.
like I'll prove it to them and they'll look at me like I did some sort of like magic.
Magic, you wave the thing. Mm-hmm.
All it was is it just inclusivity, bringing their other parts that maybe are shunned or ignored into the conversation, because inclusivity has a way of giving us power because it aligns us so we can move forward stronger.
Right.
And that's how I think maybe what I do, even though I don't use the language that you use, is there are similarities.
Mm-hmm. I, by the way, I believe that inclusivity is the flip side. Like I really believe that to decolonize work, we need to integrate, inclusion and belonging and safety. So this, I'm going to steal that exact exercise. I'm telling you now, I'm going to do it in a team meeting because I'm curious about this witnessing of the critical voice, how you've seen that apply in other areas, whether relationships or other aspects of your work. Because I tend to feel that the medicine that we offer clients is the same medicine, one, that we need, and that two, we're using in other spaces for our own health. So how have you seen that show up?
That same principle and philosophy in other places,
Yeah.
it's the bedrock of my existence. Everything I do is that. Yeah, like every relationship, everything I'm building, every project I'm working on, my intimate relationship with my partner, like the work I do with my therapist and my coaches, like everything is that, is integrating the different parts and allowing, and it's not like, maybe this is the wrong word, but it's not equal. Like there's a part that maybe is a 8-year-old kid, and I'm not going to give that 8-year-old kid, Darius, equal parts responsibility of my life now.
For sure. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to leave the more adult part in charge because that's not even fair to the 8-year-old Darius, right? And so, yeah, that work is everywhere because it's the same thing. There are parts of us that, and what I would say is, and I heard you say like that more critical part, even that I would be cautious of because it's not a more critical part. When you call the part, it's like if you called your kid, you're my critical kid. Then they're like, okay, that's it. I'm
Right.
the critic. Instead of like, no, I'm Jeff or Jim or Todd or whatever, right? It's like, no, you are being critical in this moment. But that part is not like, I hear people use this all the time. It's like my gremlin or my demon or I'm like, that is the worst thing you could possibly say to this poor part that's just trying to do the best it can,
Mm-hmm.
and it's more protective, sure, but it's not a demon. It's not, you don't need to kill it, you don't need to murder it, you don't need to jail it, you don't need to swear at it. It's a child, most likely,
Mm-hmm.
and it just wants to feel safe and integrated in the family.
The conversation that I'm thinking about that I would have liked to have had using this framework, um, is in many work contexts, when I'm asking myself the question, is it because I'm a woman? Or is it because I'm a Black woman? Is it because I'm an immigrant Black woman? Or whatever it is. Like as I hear that voice, it would feel so healing to be able to say that, to have a safe space where that can be integrated into the conversation. Because then my monitoring of, wait, is it because, can actually go down, because I keep monitoring it because I
Yes.
can't, it doesn't have any space to be. And then it
Yeah.
gets a space to be in outside of the context, but then
Yeah.
it doesn't get to be acknowledged within the space that it's actually voicing its awareness. And I think that the whole process of noticing, pausing, noticing, bringing in, and then creating a new whole that says,
Yeah.
yes, I've seen, I've witnessed, I've heard you, and, feels
Yeah.
really, really nourishing.
It's so important. So the reason I did it wasn't some, like, because it was very practical. I did it because I would be sitting in photography sessions with these incredible humans who are leaders of leaders, and I could see that they were no longer being present. And in my head, I feel like sometimes I have this weird superpower where I can see your child selves, and they're like this adult, this powerful adult, and there's a 5-year-old, 8-year-old, 10-year-old of them grabbing their arm, yanking them, being like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. And I'm trying to take a picture of them in their like charismatic, powerful self. What is the disconnect? And so I started seeing like this part of you that is being resistant. Instead of being hard with it, we just need to spend a little time with it and love it and let it know that it's safe so that it could be present for the rest of the shoot. And that's sort of what it sounds like when you have that thing going on in your head. It's like if you find a productive way to release that, then you could drop back into you now.
I actually feel that in teams and in spaces of work, what we want to build is the capacity to say it to each other so that we can,
Yeah.
like, yes, so it's the integration of the us on the outside. My last question, Darius, because I'm curious now, again, from this artist perspective, one of the big kahunas within, I guess, of the colonial framework is how productivity was defined, or kind of, what's productive work. And I know that many of my artist friends have constantly worked on, what does it look like to be productive? Is it about the money? Is it about selling your art? Is it about how have you worked with this idea of productivity in your own business and with, I don't know, with your clients maybe?
It's a good question. I think there's two general classes of artists, and both are beautiful and wonderful and should be celebrated. There's amateur artists and professional artists. If you're an amateur artist, productivity is measured in joy. Is measured in, are you enjoying making things? That's it. I don't care who's clapping for you, who's liking you, who's sharing it, how much money you made. There's so much value in just making stuff and enjoying it just for you. If you're going to be a professional artist, that means you're going to put a lot more time and energy into this thing, and you're not likely going to be putting as much time and energy in other activities that can earn you money. And so there's a more seriousness to it. It's not waiting around for the muse to show up. It's like, no, you create the structure and you
Right.
show up every day. And I don't know if there's any objective metric of, you got to make money. You got to pay your bills.
Right.
You got to, you got to do those things, or else you're going to start to resent the art.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really bad for your heart and
Yeah.
your soul and your well-being.
Right.
But also, I am a firm believer that you can be a thriving artist.
Right.
If you are willing to work your butt off, it's very, very hard work. Being a thriving, successful art, and different art forms I've come to understand are very different.
Right.
Like you often, like certain like art forms have business applications for corporate world too, and that's how a lot of artists pay the bills.
Right.
Like if you're a photographer, you can also do like fashion photography or e-commerce, and that could pay your bills so you could do the real photography you want to do.
Right.
Certain art forms like singing, it's a little harder. My friends that are musical artists, it's like there aren't a lot of corporations that have this like other side that they can pay you. So like different art forms are different. And again, I would constantly question, like, do you really want to be a professional artist? Maybe you just want to do it for fun.
Right.
Like, is that your dream or is that somebody else's dream?
Right.
You know what I mean? And if it truly is your dream, then like, don't listen to anyone. Chase that dream, because it's not even the outcome. It's like the process of chasing that dream. You will become someone extraordinary. Yeah.
I love the kind of deep connection with joy and your heart, because it sounds like, although you put these two artists in different categories, sounds like they both have joy and kind that are nourishing their hearts. And I think that's such a contrast to what's been told to be productive, or what's centered as the way to become productive. And like you're kind of really leaning into that other side, I guess. Like if we're letting go of joy and if we're not nourishing our hearts, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't have, it's like reframing value from external metrics to this thing that's deeply about who we are as people and what we love. Cool.
Yeah, joy is fundamental. It's like, what's the point if you don't have joy? It's like,
Right.
it's the cost is too much if you don't have joy.
I think that's a good point for us to wrap up. Darius, thank you so much. If you were just anybody that's listening to this and kind of holding this question of leaning into joy, you have the magic microphone for like 1 second more. Leaning into joy from the framework of, the systems have stripped that away. There are these systems that have made lack of joy normal. What's your closing thought?
Around which question?
Making the systems have stripped joy away. So a person is listening here now and that feels, utopian. What's the access point in?
No system ever could strip away joy.
Okay.
Joy is not happiness. Joy is not, being rich. Joy is the most accessible thing in existence. And it's a myth. It's a propaganda myth that joy requires anything. If you truly tap in and you just take a breath, there's just so much joy. So much joy. Joy is like, I just got goosebumps, literally, right? Joy and happiness are two very different things. Joy is accessible with just the breath. It's in the simplest things in existence. And so no matter where you are, no system, no human, no country, no anything can take joy away.
Thank you. My heart felt, I took the breath with you and I felt my heart, and it's like,
yeah, it's right there. Even if you access 1% more joy, it's a win.
Absolutely. And so much more power to see differently when we access that 1% more joy. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Your information is here in the show notes. I think people could access some joy with your challenge if it's being offered when next this is when people see this. So I'm gonna, hopefully you'll send me that link and I'm gonna put it here. But thank you so much, Darius, for this time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.